Hey guys, this is Jay Calder with Jay Unboxing, going over the weekend's results and going to be handing out some fighter grades. And of course, would love if you guys would go ahead and hand out some of your own grades in the comments section below. Would love to hear them all. So, not a lot of great action this weekend in terms of just the amount of it. The fights were okay and everything that happened, but not a great deal other than the Joe Smith versus Stephen Geffrard fight and card that happened on Saturday in Verona, New York. But nonetheless, we will get into it and break down some of those fights, obviously, including the main event as well as some of the undercard action. So, without much more delay, let's get into it. Now, the first fighter we're going to go with here is Omar Rosales, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is an A minus. Now, of course, he defeated Raekwon Butler via a 6-round unanimous decision on the preliminary fights in a junior welterweight clash on the Joe Smith versus Stephen Geffrard undercard. What I will say is I give him this grade because he was aggressive and I liked that about him, but he also stayed defensively smart, especially early on in that fight. He was very, very good at kind of making sure he was okay on both sides of the street there, so to speak. He was pretty solid in terms of making sure he wasn't getting caught too cleanly. He also had a nice body attack, which I thought was pretty strong for him in this fight, and you could see him digging there and really putting together his shots really well. He wasn't just one dimensional, he wasn't just throwing for the sake of it. He would switch up and vary the speed and the power of his shots, and like I said, would go downstairs from time to time as well. The only area that I could see really giving him a bit of a minus here, really, and which is where the A minus comes from, is he sort of perhaps lacks a little bit of raw power. You can look at his record now, which is still relatively new, but he doesn't have a great deal of stoppages. And if you looked at that first round, it looked like he could have gotten him out of there, but just couldn't quite finish him off. And these are the sort of fights at this point in your career where you're looking to finish people off. These are the sort of fighters that are supposed to be stopped by you if you, in fact, do have that kind of power. He might not, and that's okay, and he might have to develop it and grow into it a bit more. But all things considered, I mean, he had a nice array of shots. Like I said, he went to the body and was both offensive and defensive when he needed to be. So definitely an interesting fighter to watch, and that's why I go with the grade that I go with. Now, the next fighter I'm going to go with here is Abraham Nova, and the grade I'm going to be going with is a B plus. He defeated William Encarnacion via 8-round technical knockout in a junior lightweight clash, also on the same undercard. Some of the things I liked about him are pretty obvious. I think he's a spiteful puncher, and I think that's very important. He puts emphasis in trying to hurt you with those shots. He could vary it up as well, and he did at times. He wasn't just completely headhunting or trying to blast him out of there with every single shot, but the shots he did throw with intent, there was an intent behind them. Did he have the most power? Not necessarily, but certainly enough to get you to respect him, and he certainly threw with the intent of trying to hurt you. He also put those shots together well, and I think that kind of showed a little bit of a weakness in him, which was some defensive holes as a result of some of that aggression. But he did put those shots together well, and he was aggressive, which again you like to see in these kind of fighters coming up, because again, if they're not getting these guys out of here, what's that going to say for when they have to step up and face someone who's not interested in losing that fight and has won just as much, if not more, than they have? That being said, it was an impressive performance in that way. He did put together his stuff, and he really did work him over and did it pretty consistently. Again, this fight lasted into the 8th frame, and from about round 1 to round 8, he kind of ramped it up, which is what you do like to see. You don't want to see him start so strong and fade out. It was quite the opposite with him. He actually started pretty well and finished pretty well in that respect. I do give him a slight knock here, of course, with all due respect to Encarnacion. He was a late replacement, and the fact that it did take him the better part of those 10 rounds to get Encarnacion out of there has to be counted a little bit against Nova, in my personal opinion. You should be able to handle your substitute fighters here. I mean, that's just the way it is, in my personal opinion. That being said, he gets the grade he gets. Now, the third fighter that we're going to go with here is Joe Smith Jr. himself, and the grade that I'll be giving him is a C+. He, of course, defeated Stephen Geffrard via 9th-round technical knockout, defending his WBO light heavyweight title in the main event on Saturday in the process. Now, we got to be honest here. There's some goods here as well, and I would say one of those is that he got the job done. Of course, that's all that matters. You keep winning, you keep getting those paydays, you keep racking up your opportunities, and at the end of the day, you're always giving yourself another shot to have something good happen. And he's showed what he has, what he is able to do. He's a strong-willed guy. He's got heart. He can take a shot. He's not easily deterred. He always believes he has an ability to do something in this fight because he kind of does to some degree with that power. But this performance also showed some of his weaknesses, in my personal opinion. He seemed lost in there at times, kind of caught between trying to box and be responsible and show more wrinkles in his games than he has maybe in his last couple of fights. But it's not in his nature and didn't always come across as a natural movement for him at times, is the best way to put it. He seemed a little off in those moments when he was pressuring him and even just putting together any kind of punches at all, just keeping him busy before he would kind of speed change and adjust and throw that fastball, so to speak. That seemed to be his best, and those seemed to be his best moments. And as long as his engine can allow for him to do that, that's what I would suggest he do. The issues again come when it seems like all the other 175 pounders near the top of the division, not just Beterbiev, not just Dmitry Bivol, but these kind of guys who are just near the top at light heavyweight seem like they could have done better in this fight. That's when you run into these problems where it becomes difficult to say this was such a great performance. He just did not make you believe he's one of the best light heavyweights in the world, really, or that he's, has much of a shot at unifying if these sort of fights are to happen. He wants a Canelo, he wants a Beterbiev, he wants a Bivol perhaps next. Well, Bivol's already beat him, and I don't see many people willing to bet that he's going to beat the other two guys I mentioned there. And off the back of his performance, I don't really see that happening much more at all. That being said, to close off with a positive statement here, the power is always there, and so he gives himself a shot in those fights, but it wasn't one of his best performances in my personal opinion, which is why he gets the grade he gets. Now, the final fighter we're going to go with here is Steven Geffrard himself, and I'm going with a C minus. Of course, this was in a loss to Joe Smith, as I just mentioned, via ninth round technical knockout in a light heavyweight title bout. The reason I'm going with the grade here is because he had opportunities. This was not a situation where he's facing, he's a late replacement, 8 days notice against the best fighter in the world, and he had no shot at this whatsoever. No, he did have opportunities, and so this was a much more even fight than maybe it should have been, but nonetheless it was. And he just didn't seize the moment, and I think that's going to kind of be indicative of the way perhaps the rest of his career plays out. A guy who has had opportunities because he has skills. He is not the worst fighter in the world. He just can't seem to put it all together. The mentality might be his issue. And if you look at the way that he fought this fight, when Smith was not throwing much, Geffrard actually could get off. He would throw some shots. His punt, he had a nice little left hook. He would put forth some effort. It was the moment he faced really any major resistance, he shelled up and just was, effectively pushed into letting the fight go the way Smith wanted it to. And, that's just not going to get it done against really anyone near the top of most divisions. You have to have a little more gumption, a little bit more of an ability to take over a fight when need be. Ultimately, this kind of decides what sort of opponent Geffrard can be. And there's a good and a bad to it. He's in a position now where, because he has a little bit of a name, has been on television, has faced a former, in this case, a current titleist, there's going to be some demand for other fighters at 175 pounds to not want to take him on and play that comparison game of how well they can do versus Smith. And that, can get Geffrard paid, and that can put him out there and he can potentially have another couple of decent fights. The bad side to that is, number one, do you want to be that kind of opponent brought in? And number two, if your mentality doesn't change enough for you to really pull the trigger when necessary, how much more success are you going to have in those fights with perhaps even more talented fighters? In any event, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts as well as all of your grades and kind of who stood out to you this week. And again, not a great deal of action, but would like to hear your thoughts on that. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcaldorn_JOB, and you can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. Love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more. Of course, be sure to check out my prediction for Gary Russell versus Merck Masayo, which will be coming out later this week. So go ahead and subscribe. Make sure you get notified about that as well. And as always, until next time.